Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of the Blue Room. Today we're looking at payment processing, how to improve cash flow and reduce fraud. And we have with us this afternoon an expert in this field, Raj Randhawa, CEO of AVQuest. Raj has been 30 years in the industry, handling payment processing in various sectors, from manufacturing, telecoms, television, broadband, as well as specific to us, the hospitality sector, hotels and service departments. We'll be discussing various solutions specific to service department operators, agents, and owners. But I don't want to spoil the thunder too much, so I'm going to bring Raj onto the stage now. And hi, Raj, welcome. And if you could, viewers, hit the like button if you're on LinkedIn, the celebrate, the applause button, and it will then alert people to the fact that we are live. Please put your comments and questions in the chat, and as per the promotional graphics, we need your questions and comments. They're very welcome, and I'm sure that Raj will be able to help with those. But Raj, welcome, old friend. Where do we start really with a topic that's so fundamental to everybody's business? We first with each other, I think, when you were at Think Apartments.
That's right.
So would you like perhaps to give the viewers a bit of background on yourself with Think Apartments and the service department, and we'll take it from there maybe.
Okay. First of all, payments technology is a big topic. So starting with Think Apartments would be interesting because we did a lot of work there. Basically, if you think about it, service department operators either own their own buildings or they lease property and they run leases. And one of the things that the owner of Think wanted to do, he had a very big plan to have 1,000 apartments, which he actually almost achieved. Some of them and he had his own buildings. But what he wanted was to be able to offer lots of services that you would normally associate with hotels. But he wanted to ensure that the operation of the service department environment was really very powerful because it had required fewer people, but could deliver a great deal. But he didn't want to lose any money. So his view was actually, we make our money from the ADR, and all the other services we offer, we do charge for them, but we don't try to fleece the customer in any way. We try to make sure that they're always treated in the right way. Now, this is going back 10 years. Okay, so to give you an idea of what was achieved, we were able to offer pay-per-view to all the users, all their customers. We were able to offer flexible internet, so you could actually pay a little bit more, and your individual apartment would get more internet than somebody else's. We were able to charge for any telephone calls. In fact, one of the things that I wanted to introduce there was the idea that you just pay £5 a week. At that time, if you're staying for a day or two, maybe even £5 a day, but it would allow you a single fee, a small fee, and it would allow you to actually call anywhere in the world free of charge. Okay, and that infrastructure was put in place. And then obviously there's lots of things to do with invoicing and taking payments. We did a lot of corporate bookings, so handling the payments of corporate bookings. And I think the big thing was the move to OTAs, because going to OTAs, there's a lot of paperwork you can get involved with. The accounting department was frightened of having to deal with lots and lots of bookings. So automation became really fundamental. Now, when we started, And by the way, when I talk about all this infrastructure, all these apartments, they were individual apartments. They're no different to having your own individual house. It wasn't like they had a lot of these apartments didn't have any common infrastructure. It was actually done by directly linking into the various utilities, etc., that were being offered by the various companies in the area. So when we started with about 25, 30 apartments. And at that time, I remember the accounts team had 4 people, and 3 of them were working on invoicing and payments. By the time we got to about 900, the automation was so good with the payments and the invoicing that they only needed 2 people. So they grew substantially. Okay, but the automation, and this is why the payments technology is so important. The automation was so good. It ensured that all the bookings that needed to be paid for were paid for in advance. And also it kept an eye on what the debts were, so that we knew when people weren't paying, especially with companies. If companies suddenly found themselves deciding not to pay, the system was actually designed around the concept of we must win. So if ever there was a dispute with a corporate or with an individual regarding invoicing, payments, contracts, the whole system was geared towards, we accept you've said what you've said, but guess what? This is the truth. This is what's happened. We always win. Okay. So that is a real, and that's something that people sometimes forget. You know, it's very, with the OTAs, it's easy to think that the OTAs will help you all the time. That's not always the case.
And Raj, briefly, because what we'll do is I'll ask this question, but I'll then dive into the comments and any questions from the audience so far, and then we'll continue. But in a nutshell, is it, so we're talking about payment processing with the OTAs? Is that really what we're talking about?
That's certainly how we started with AVQuest. Okay, that's now broadening. It's broadening because the new legislation that was introduced around 2019 is covering all electronic payments.
Oh, okay. Okay, then we'll come into
protections that you expect with card payments. You now need to start looking at getting similar protections with bank transfers and so on.
Okay, well, that sounds an interesting place to start when we come back on that one. We'll just say hi to Adam Walsh there from Star.
Hello, Adam,
hi, everyone. That would be interesting as well to talk about maybe the integration of software that your own systems and perhaps other systems with which you can.
And Adam's at Star, and we're integrated with Star, and Star's very good. You know, we've got a very good integration with them.
Exactly. Veronica Sheffield. Hi, Veronica. Thanks.
Hi, Veronica.
Martin from Abode Bed.
Yeah.
Hi, Martin. Stephanie, hi from Chicago. Hi, Stephanie. Thanks for joining us. Chris from iPrac. Interesting topic, one I'm interested in as part of the trust journey. So yeah,
very important point. Yeah,
exactly.
I'm assuming the trust. You're saying trust accreditation. So, you know, when I say trust, I mean the trust that the guest has with the journey, as well as the operator has with the journey that you're providing to the customer, because it works both ways.
Yeah. No, that's right. Anand from Cloud Apartments there. Hi, Anand. Veronica, Richard, looking forward to discussion with Raj, payments and cash flow, vital to service accommodation and corporate housing. Yeah, indeed. Thanks, Veronica. Yatsek from Silver Service Departments in Southampton. Hi, Yatsek. Bianca from a very cold Berlin, I'm sure. My wife and daughter just returned from Berlin, and they were frozen out there. Hi, Bianca. Thanks for joining us. So yeah, just had one. Etim from Sky Villian Apartments. Hi, Etim. Thank you for coming along. So the OTAs and beyond the OTAs. So because I'll warn the audience now, and I've already forewarned you, haven't I, Raj? I'm gonna have to dumb this really down because I would love to understand payments, and I'm not an accountant, and so forgive me any accountants who are watching, and some of the questions that I might ask. But we're kind of, can we separate, so this payment processing thing, can we separate it all? So in other words, we've got like an Excel spreadsheet, and we've got operators and agents and owners, perhaps, and then also that might separate into how they work on the OTAs and how they work outside of the OTAs. Is that
exactly?
Would you like to kind of develop that kind of like a structure so that the audience can kind of get a handle on? Over to you.
Okay, so the best way, I think, to deal with this is, first of all, let's separate via the sources of bookings. So OTAs, and also your own booking engine. Normally, if you're on the OTAs, you'd have a website and have a booking engine on there as well. Let's treat that as one group of, or one source of income in terms of payments. Okay. Now, I would argue that it's really important that the whole of that process be completely automated when you're taking an OTA booking. Okay. When you're automating these type of environments, one, your cash flow is maximized. It's always going to be maximized, and you can tune things to further improve your cash flows in those areas. Even if now we've got people using vCard, for instance, Booking.com offer vCard, or they offer the individual card. They offer lots of options. They give you lots of options in terms of when to take a payment and so on. Most hotels have the concept of early bird bookings, and they might have a book where you pay up front. You might have a booking where you pay, say, a week a deposit or the full amount a week before you arrive, and then you have on arrival and on departure. Those are fundamentally the four type of things that a hotel would do. Service departments, in my experience, nobody wants to have on departure unless for a leisure-based booking. Having payments on arrival only really suits you if you actually have a reception. So ultimately, you want the payments to be handled prior to arrival. Okay. Now, you can do all of that when you actually are dealing with the individual directly. Where you have some complications are where you have vCard. vCards are virtual cards. These are just basically credit cards that a system can generate and put money on, and they give you a date and time to which you should process it. And normally the date time given is a start date time, and you got up to 6 months to process it. All of that can be automated, and depending on the size of operation, you can actually process virtual cards, either on the day of arrival, maybe the day after, or in advance. And certainly all of our bigger customers, and even some of our smaller customers now, are actually processing virtual cards. We're processing them prior to arrival. Okay, so at least that helps the cash flow. It means you've got your money in your bank, and it's all there. And the good thing about a virtual card is that it's not going to fail. It will go through. Okay. The only way it will fail is if the source system, so for instance, let's say it's Booking.com. Booking.com do have a problem. Certain types of booking that come in, our system has to be slowed down in order to allow Booking.com system to generate the card properly. So we've had that issue where we've had to slow down our processing simply to accommodate some of the Booking.com issues. But in the main, all of that can be automated. The key thing is that it doesn't cover enough. A virtual card or even processing a payment sometimes is not enough. And it's becoming more and more the case now where we are being asked to pre-authorize cards prior to arrival to cover damage. Okay, and we've been doing that for a long time. But also, sometimes people have third-party cards, and that pre-authorization process can be used to actually ensure that you can reduce your chargebacks and any attempt at fraud by comparing the pre-authorizations with the card processing that it was done initially. So all of these things, when they come into play, provide you with a protected element of money coming in, a protected cash flow. And that's the key thing. The payment solution must protect your cash flow. It shouldn't be a case that you process some money and then you might have to return it. You should always, the system itself must always defend your money 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's processing. Every time it processes it, it should be done in such a way that you always defend it and you don't have to give it back as a chargeback or whatever. Okay, so OTAs, all of that can be automated quite easily, and it is always best to automate that. Obviously, there are some OTAs where there's no processing required because they do a bank transfer to you. Okay, and that's fine. But the majority of OTAs, especially where they offer flexible conditions and flexible payments options, that should all be automated, and it makes it better for you as a company as well. One of the fundamental aspects of looking at card processing with OTAs is you should think of it this way: I never ever want to see a person's credit card, but I want to make sure that all the money is banked on time, is protected, and I know we're okay. And that's really that is what you should be aiming for with the OTAs. Now, when it comes to the corporate side, sorry.
No, go ahead, Raj. You go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to talk about the corporate side. So corporate side is not like OTAs, is it? So corporate side, from my perspective, is made up of effectively two types of corporate. You know, there's those who are doing relocation, etc., and they're paying deposits, and you know the payments are done by commission, etc., or those payments are, it's all invoiced. You pay within a certain amount of time, etc. And then there's the other type of invoicing or corporates that you can get where they just want to come in on a corporate rate. They might come through the GDS, wherever, but they come in, and in some respects, they're no different to a leisure customer, but you might have different rules for them. Yeah, you might want to, for instance, not take the payment up front, or you might say, yes, it must take the payment up front. So with the corporates, it really comes down to how big you are. I mean, if you've got large corporates coming, if you've got large groups, there's some new stuff coming along. I don't even heard of the term digital invoice. Okay, so these are invoices where when they go out, once they're accepted, the payment is initiated straight away. Okay, so there's a lot of work being done around that, and we've done some stuff around that as well. So it is changing. And that's important. And there's also the other aspect of corporate booking. So, for instance, if you're an agent, okay, it is possible to have a payment taken by the corporate. So the corporate payment is taken via a card, and automatically you get your commission, and the net amount goes to the actual operator. Now, one of the things that we did a few years ago was there was actually a I mean, it wasn't a corporate, but it gives you an example of what can be done. So there was basically a farm that was actually opening up. It opened itself up during the summer for campsites. Okay, and the farmer couldn't afford a Wi-Fi system, but everybody wanted access to the internet. So what he did was he actually got a company involved who provided the systems, and they asked us to handle all the payments. And what we did, every time you bought a voucher for that system, X amount would go to the farmer, Y amount would actually go to the manufacturer, and Z amount actually went to the agent, all from the one transaction. Okay, and we had to reconcile everything. So there's lots and lots of flexibility that you can use. And you know, I think that sometimes people get too caught up with the technology, and they should just think about the business, what they're trying to achieve. If you try it, and that's how they should be focused, even on the payment side. Doesn't matter which side it is, but payments in particular, that's really important. And some of the other things that are coming along now, that we're doing some.
I'm going to jump in at that point because then we can talk about like what's coming along in a little while. And if I could just kind of like try to have processed then some of that, if not all of it, and hopefully it will it might be of help to some of the viewers. But the way I am seeing it, because some of the viewers will probably you know, they will have the various systems. They will be working with the OTAs. They'll have the PMS and the channel manager, and it's hooking into various payment processing and what have you. And I'd love to ask you in a little while then how payment processing software such as your own can help, and how it plugs in and what have you. It's my understanding that it's kind of the essence is it's all about automating certain processes which happen anyway, with regards to managing the deposits effectively, reducing refunds, especially these days where you have a lot of last minute cancellations. You know, we've had COVID, we have the what's going on in Europe right now as well, and people might want to stop their travel and their plans. So you've got a system then which is making bookings, it's taking deposits, it's managing refunds. You've come because you cancellations might be coming in, and you want to, let's face it, add an additional hurdle perhaps to those cancellations, and payment processing such as your own can assist with that. Is that right so far?
That is correct. Yeah, that is correct. I mean, obviously, I haven't talked about how we plug into the various solutions that are out there, because obviously,
I'd love to hear that, because I've asked you many times, I've never understood it. I'm joking.
Right. Okay. So this is where it gets a bit complicated.
Okay.
AVQuest are a payments platform. I think that's the most important thing. No, AVQuest as a company, we are a payments platform, and we do plug into PMSs. We have lots of interfaces. Obviously, we have to work with the PMSs, okay, and some PMSs have their own solutions. Fine, no, but we are really there for those PMSs that don't want to really take on the whole area of payments, because it can become pretty complicated. So with some PMSs, we can plug in for the OTA side. We can either plug directly into the channel manager, or we plug into the PMS. And from a PMS perspective, that's probably about, it can take anything from a few minutes to a day, or it might require some development. Okay, but a lot of PMSs can plug our system in with very little. It's just a configuration change, actually. Okay, to actually process the actual payment. Then the question is, do you want us to update the PMS or not? And that's where the PMS provider has to have a deposit interface, or use our deposit interface, and that may require some development. Or it could be that the operator just says, because you're telling us every time a payment's made, we'll do it manually. Yeah, it depends on your size, but usually we can plug in very easily. Now, in the more complex environments, for instance, we have customers who have bespoke systems. So there are some pretty big service department operators out there who have built their own systems because it's tuned completely to their business. Okay, they'll never use an off-the-shelf package. They'll never even a system like Oracle or Protel or any of the big guys. They won't be able to satisfy the requirements of that particular organization, because their whole thinking is we need to be able to have maximum flexibility, and we need to make sure the whole technology is there to support their vision that they have. And service departments are not like hotels. Now, there are significant differences between the two. So finding a solution that can do that is very hard. So they have these bespoke systems, and in those cases, they do tend to involve us, because what we do is we reduce some of the complexity of development that those people have to deal with. So when you plug us in, you start becoming more compliant regarding PCI compliance. And to process a card, you as a hotel or service department operator, you have to be PCI compliant, or you have to have PCI compliant processes. Okay, and that's how you eliminate fraud. So yes, we can plug in very easily. Existing systems, I mean, you mentioned Adam was online. I mean, Star, we've been working there for many, many years, but there are other channel managers as well. And the whole idea is we should be able to plug in seamlessly. We are a back office system, but it just works. I mean, the idea is it just works, and it works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's how we designed the entire system. I mean, we can't afford to allow any downtime. I mean, some of our customers are processing over £1 million a month. You can't allow anything to happen that might reduce that money. It has to work every time, all the time. Anything other than that is unacceptable.
So you make it easier, a smoother process, and you allow people to sleep better as well, perhaps, because you add an extra layer of security with all that process. So I think that so adding that, so people that have that existing software and the process, you can then add an extra layer, which fraud and chargebacks will certainly help with that. As well as
very few of our customers have chargebacks because of the fact that we're processing in the correct way. And whenever there is a chargeback, and it's very rare that we see a chargeback, but when there is a chargeback, we treat that as a priority one call. Because chargebacks, you have to respond within a certain time frame. And most operators struggle with that time frame. Okay, so it's better for the payments provider, whoever that payments provider, whoever provides you technology to handle a payment, should be supporting you 100% all the way through, supporting you in defending a chargeback. Okay, and that's really, really important. And the acquirers want to see that as well. It's not like they're sitting there just want to give you money back because you said you want your money back. There's lots of that they want third-party evidence that everything's been done correctly, and that's really important.
Exactly right. No, it's so thank you, Raj, for clarifying that. I think what we'll do is we'll play the sponsor video, and I'd like to thank all sponsors for the support of Saber Networking and the Blue Room. We'll play the sponsor video. We'll then come back. We'll say hi to some of the people in the audience that are sending in comments, and I think there may have been one question there. Please do ask your questions. There is literally no question that is too stupid, because I've asked them and will continue to ask them. So please don't feel embarrassed about asking any question at all. And then we'll come back after that, and we'll talk about developments in the future, tax and other regulations that are coming in, perhaps, Raj. So, but at the moment, so we'll play the sponsor video, and then we'll be back in a minute. And we're back in the room. It's always very abrupt. I need one of those kind of fading desk things that you have. So yeah, let's say hi to some of the people that have joined us in the meantime. Nahid Ibrahim, thank you for joining us. Nahid from iStay in Atlanta. We have Jack
Hello,
Jampel.
Jack. Yeah,
from Striker. Mike from Hazelmere. Mike, put your company name in there as well. So ranks up there with Hazelmere ranks up there with. Oh no, really? Yeah, Chicago. Mike is a native of Sheffield, so he should know. So Veronica, now is this a question, Veronica? It is. So we'll come back onto that one, Veronica. Jamie, hi Jamie, always good to see you. Hi Richard and Raj, sorry for late join, no problem. Client calls, very interesting topic. Thanks Jamie, thank you. So should we let's go into these questions. I'm going to look onto a big screen that I can actually see the writing. How likely is it that using the virtual card processing system an accommodation provider can find the card presented is fraudulent if not using an OTA?
Okay, so that question. Okay, so first of all, the virtual card system. We need to split it into two things. Virtual cards are issued by businesses. They're not issued by individuals. So business like Booking.com is a business. Expedia is a business. Any business can issue a virtual card. Okay, and it's basically a card that has all the attributes of a credit card, except the amount to be taken is determined by the business, not by you. So imagine you were to, imagine you've got a card that's a voucher, or no, these gift cards that you get from, which you can buy from any shop, on the high street. You can go in there, you can buy, I go to a bookstore, I buy a voucher card, and it looks like a credit card, etc. That money on there, you can use when you purchase a book at any time. It's not once it's issued to you, you can use it up until the expiry date. Yeah. A virtual card, the actual date when you can take that payment is determined by the business. So Booking.com, Expedia will actually, and Agoda and other companies like that will determine when you take the card. Now they've already taken the money from the individual. All right. So they've taken the money, and only then will they release those funds onto that virtual card. Once you've actually got that money from the virtual card, then that money should be yours. One of the problems that can happen is that Booking.com might decide to do a refund without even, they might accept a cancellation. And in that case, you will have to give the money back. You have very little control over it, because ultimately you're being driven by whatever Booking.com say. But it's quite rare. One of the biggest problems that happened when the pandemic started in 2020 was that Booking.com hurt a lot of hotels by doing what's like a global change on virtual cards and pushing out the dates you could take the money by 2 or 3 months. So that hurt the cash flow of a lot of actual businesses. But they did it because they anticipated refunds. So they didn't want the money leaving their bank accounts. Okay. So virtual cards in the main don't really lead to fraudulent transactions. The problem for hotels are that you have so little control over whether you have to give the money back or not. Yeah. If the customer complains to the OTA and the OTA says, right, okay, we're going to rebook you, I'll give you money back, you have to give the money back, and then the OTA will demand that you give them the money back. Okay, so that's one aspect of virtual cards. The other problem with the virtual card is that it doesn't belong to the person who's coming to stay with you. So if there's any breakage and you don't have any credit card details, that's it. You've got no way of getting any money back other than chasing the guest after they've left. Okay, if there's some additional charges that need to be paid, unless you chase the guest, it's impossible. So what we normally do for a lot of customers now, in the UK especially, prior to arrival, we'll go through a pre-authorized process so that at least you've got access to X amount of funds should there be a problem. Yeah. Now, no one's saying there is going to be a problem, but at least you're protecting your business. and you're protecting yourselves in case there is a problem of a breakage or someone hasn't paid for their parking, etc., etc. So that's where the issue with virtual cards are. Okay, so virtual cards primarily are a business-to-business card, really.
Right, and issued by the OTA, like Veronica said there, issued by the
exactly.
OTA.
So what happens is there are a number of big organizations. They, what they do is they actually generate these things, and the businesses just link into those systems and they get their cards. I mean, there are quite a few companies out there offering the service. And if somebody wanted to set up an OTA tomorrow, I'm more than happy to explain how all this stuff works so they can do the same thing. It's available to anybody who wants to actually do business on the internet. It's a straightforward thing. And the good thing about it from a OTA perspective, or if you're taking payments over the internet, if you're a business working as an agent, it just means you get your money into your bank account and you're only releasing it when it suits you. So it helps your cash flow. It doesn't help the cash flow of the operator, though.
Right.
Which is why a lot of operators, so certainly the bigger operators, that they'll try to ensure that not all of their business is driven by virtual card. The other problem with virtual cards are they tend to be more expensive to process. So, and I don't mean that in the terms of an AVQuest cost. I'm talking about your acquirer. So the people who are providing you with the credit facilities will normally charge you more for a virtual card than for, say, a UK-based individual using their card. So that might be 1%.
1%.
1% more, sometimes even more. If you go into Europe, it can be as much as 2 or 3% more.
Right.
It makes a big difference on the cash flow of the business if they're too dependent on virtual cards. Right.
Interesting. Gosh. So Veronica says clarification is helpful in respect of virtual cards and how they work. Yeah, no, thanks, Veronica. Thank you for your question. I have another question from Jamie. Jamie, I assume you're GDPR compliant.
Yeah.
As you know, your client had to be compliant, as well as any subcontractors, as all are liable if breached. So is GDPR, do you want to expand on that and how that?
Certainly GDPR compliant, absolutely. We are GDPR compliant by not, in fact, we've, it's one of the strange things. We have a fraud control system built into our systems. So as well as doing payments processing, we have our own mechanisms to work out fraud and whether it's happening. Okay. Now the anti-fraud system is shared across all our customers, but the data in that system is never exposed. So we use collective data. It's never ever exposed, and it's used purely for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to prevent fraud. So it's actually looking at patterns of behavior, looking at certain transactions to see, is it potentially fraudulent? So we try to capture fraud before it actually happens. And obviously we are GDPR compliant, but what's really important is that if somebody has a GDPR, if we get a request from an individual for data, we always redirect it through our customer, because ultimately we work very closely with them, but also we don't expose data. It's just not exposed. So we're not like, you can't just turn up and say, AVQuest, tell me what you know. We would ask, what makes you think we're using your data? Where's your customer, or where's your hotel or service department or agent? And we would work with them to provide the data, because the data they're expecting is more than what we might have.
Right. Okay.
So
thank you.
To get that relationship right. Otherwise, the comment that Jamie's made there about the subcontractors, if they're not GDPR compliant and he might be liable for their activities, well, that's a real problem, and we understand that. So we always work with the operator. We never work in isolation, or with the agent. We never ever work in isolation. That's a huge. I think that's where GDPR can really come back to hurt you.
Right. Well, yeah. And what's running through my mind in blissful ignorance of this whole topic really is what what's more threatening to cash flow, the fraudulent activity or the new regulations with regards to, it's my basic understanding that, and if you compare, if maybe we go on to kind of new developments, and we've not discussed this recently, Raj, so I might be completely wrong, but it's my understanding that some of the regulations allow refund to the client, basically accessing your bank account almost to get money back. Is that?
Yeah. So basically there was a court case which Air France had, where they basically were taken to court, and it went all the way to the European high courts there. And the issue was Air France had actually sold an air ticket, a ticket for their airline for a journey. With it was actually a payment for a hotel room. The hotel room was actually non-refundable, but the dispute between the individual and Air France resulted in Air France actually paying back the ticket amount. Okay, the individual then took Air France to court because they wanted their hotel stay amount to be also refunded. And the courts came down in favor of the individual, and they actually gave a direction of what it now means to be non-refundable. And by the time they did that ruling, we were still in the EU, but then we came out of the EU. Okay, so we have a bit more flexibility in the UK than some of the EU countries. Now, one of the things that resulted as a direct result of that particular case, HMRC changed the rules regarding VAT. So when you have a cancellation of a non-refundable booking, you have to if the request is done in the correct way, you can keep the net amount that's offered. So let's say it's £100 plus VAT. Yeah. So you've been paid £120. You then have to return the £20. So you can keep the £100, but you've got to return the £20. All right. So that was what HMRC said. And there's also this question of what is a non-refundable booking. So HMRC have left that quite open. But in Europe, in some of the jurisdictions, a non-refundable booking is one where you can demonstrate, it's only in the case it's non-refundable, where you can demonstrate that you cannot resell that room. Okay, so that has a big issue for service department operators because they're now being treated like hotels. So the payment solutions that we provide, and certainly hopefully other people provide, will help back up your claim that this is a correct non-refundable booking. That it's hard because the analytics will demonstrate that it's hard for you to resell a room. So therefore, you can keep that net amount. Yeah. So it is quite complicated, and it's become complicated because, in the past, a non-refundable booking, if a person cancelled, HMRC always let the operator keep the VAT. But because of the ruling in Europe, then you now have to return that VAT to the individual. And payment solutions are important in one respect of that, in that when you do a refund, you should always put the refund back through the same process that you took the money. And that way, you have less fraud, less complications. And, part of managing payments is just to reduce conversations with the guest around money. Remember I started out with this idea of we always win. Part of the process of we always win is that the automation is so good, nobody asks you any questions because they trust it.
Right. Yeah. Jamie's asked a question there. Do you get involved with city taxes or VAT? So,
yeah, we do both. Yeah, we do both. So basically, in places like Belgium, you have VAT and you have city tax. So we automate all of that stuff as well with the payments. And that's particularly interesting because sometimes you have systems that can't do it. They can only handle the VAT element, but they can't handle the city tax. So what happens is that the revenue managers or the hotel operators, because their PMSs or because whatever systems they're using can't handle city tax properly, they end up paying out of their rent. So they don't charge it on. So you have your rent, but if they don't charge on the city tax, so they end up actually losing money, or they end up being in a really awkward position where when people book with them, they actually end up booking a higher ADR than with their competitors, purely because their competitors can handle city taxes and therefore can offer a lower rate.
Right. You mentioned there actually, Raj, and thank you for the question, Jamie. And you highlighted the fact that you have clients outside the UK. So that's worth perhaps stressing for people in the audience and those watching the recording. The US as well, is that a market that
the US we haven't. I suppose ultimately nobody's asked us to do it there. In the US we can process in the US. One of the things that stopped us in the past. So basically, when AVQuest started, one of the things we did, we built our own cloud system. Okay, so this is before people were using Amazon to run their businesses. So we built our own cloud system. We've always been a cloud-orientated type of business. It's called a software as a service type of business. But when we started, the Americans came out with the Patriot Act. And as a result of the Patriot Act, we would have been required to replicate the environment in the States as well as in Europe. Okay, because there's no way that a European company is going to want to operate their business under the Patriot Act type of rules. But now we can do that. So what we did with Amazon, when we actually moved on to the Amazon environment, we actually spoke with their engineers about ensuring that we could replicate our environments to the local laws of the country, and we can do that. So if somebody wants us to do something in the States, we're more than happy to do it. I don't think it's that big a deal. I think a lot depends on how you want to run your business, to be honest. If I give an example, our customers who are bigger, their requirements are very, very different to smaller customers. Smaller customers tend to their impression of cash flow is similar in that you get as much money up front as possible. You don't want to have to deal with chargebacks, and ultimately you want to secure the money on time every time. Everybody has that view of cash flow, okay? But when you're bigger, the cash flow, you start seeing small changes make big differences. So for instance, you might suddenly decide to introduce new rates where you're taking money, not necessarily at time of booking, but maybe a week prior to arrival or a month prior to arrival. You might then start packaging things up and so on. So the bigger operators tend to want to try out these ideas to see just how far they can take the cash flow up front. So that's one thing. And secondly, bigger operators tend to also, and this is purely from the nature of having lots of property, okay? They would normally want to protect the property and protect the businesses. So they want to isolate. Now, if you get into an argument with the bank, you do not want your business to be put at risk, okay? When you're a small operator, that's not an easy thing to do. But when you're a big operator, you need people like us because we will isolate the businesses in such a way that you can always have multiple acquiring agreements for all of your properties. So if you have an acquirer, if you have an argument with one acquirer, we can just switch it over automatically to another acquirer. Your business never suffers as a result. Okay. And obviously, as you're bigger, chances are, your costs are higher. So therefore, you can't take the risks of a reduction in cash flow. Right.
Thank you. Been scribbling down one or two things here because we're moving towards 10 to the hour, and for those who are in the audience who've allocated an hour, if I kind of like just map out points that I have here to cover perhaps, and then at least we can get those in there, or you can substitute one point for another, okay. Which is so. A frivolous one, it would be my first question, but I'll do all of the kind of questions together, and then we can come back. Is money laundering, and I probably watch too much Netflix there. But whether you see any money laundering things going on up there, and don't name names, obviously, because I value my life. But the other thing is. I think perhaps visitors will be the audience will be looking and thinking, okay, well, I've got a system, it all works well, I'm taking the bookings, I get the bookings for, I have the occasional blip, but so one aspect I'd be very interested in is your response to that, where you say you might think it's all working great, but we can really improve the way your business runs. So I'd be very interested to hear that. New developments, if there are any new developments that we've not discussed yet, and how people can keep up to date with this whole payment processing kind of topic. So yeah, be interested. We can probably skip the money laundering because I was being a little bit frivolous there.
Well, I'll just mention one thing about the money laundering. If you're worried about money laundering, you should understand what the KYC process is. It's know your customer. That is the starting point of ensuring that you don't get pulled into money laundering activities. Okay, and agents in particular should be aware of that process. But money laundering is really where you get pulled in, and the problem with getting pulled in is it's a nightmare to get out. So it's really important to get that sort of process sorted out properly in the first place.
The next point was really, let's say me, I've got, this isn't a real example, but let's say I've got 10 units in a city centre somewhere, and I've got all my technology set up and I'm quite happy with it. But what would be the argument to say, yeah, but we can make your business even better?
Well, I can give you an example. The Nordic countries are currently going through quite a bit of a nightmare in terms of payment processing. Sweden, Norway, Finland, I think those affected as well. Basically, one of the biggest operators was taken over, and the systems that were working fine for ages are now being made redundant. They're actually being replaced. And the systems they're being replaced with are more expensive and don't have all the attributes of what some of the advanced systems have. So in Sweden, for instance, we don't just process cards, we also process SwishPay. Now, SwishPay is not used anywhere else other than in Sweden. SwishPay is used by 1 in 6 Swedes. I was looking at the figures just before I came on here, Richard, and to give you this month, I mean, only in the 3rd day of this month, we've already processed more SwishPay payments than credit card payments for our customers in Sweden. It's a very popular method of payment. And the beauty of that payment method is that the money is instantly in the operator's account. So when you do a SwishPay payment, one, it comes to you instantly. And secondly, it is mega cheap. If you look at, before 2012 in Britain, we used to debit cards used to be like 10p a transaction. And then because of EU rulings, it went to percentage. Okay. Now SwishPay is just a flat 10 cents. You could process €1,000, 10,000 euro. You only get charged 10 cents. You see, it's really, really cheap. So I would say, don't think about what you're doing today. Think about what you want to do tomorrow and what your customers want to do tomorrow. And also, in terms of those activities about what you want to do tomorrow, how do you protect yourself? What is being done to ensure that your money is being secured? That is really, really important. And also, the costs aren't that great. I think people tend to think that everything is expensive. It isn't. Now, implementing some of these systems is actually very cheap.
Yeah,
I suppose I would say that, wouldn't I?
Well, no, not really. In your defence, I mean, if the cost of your service and similar services, of course, if the cost of your service didn't make or save more money for your clients, then you wouldn't have been in business for so long.
That's right.
So,
Exactly.
So it's good. Before we move on, perhaps to the new development, any other developments that we've not spoken about yet, but could I just touch on this? And I'm not sure whether it's an area covered by yourself. That Jamie asks, big question is it the responsibility of the landlord, occupant, or client to pay TV and radio licensing fees? I've had to
deal with this stuff when I was at Think, because I had to sort out the licensing and all this stuff. So I don't know the situation in the States, Jamie, but in the UK, again, it comes down to the type of operation you have. If you have your own building, okay, so let's say you have a building, you own the building, it's got 30 units, you are effectively the owner and operator of that building. It is your responsibility to get the license, and there are special licenses that are available that give it a reduced rate in terms of television. You also have to have a radio license if you have a reception and you're playing the radio or any music in a public environment. Okay, so it's not for the individual units, but it's actually by the reception, etc. So you have to have those kind of things. As for pay TV, I would always argue is actually the responsibility of the person who signed the contract. So if you have not got your own building, but you've effectively leased X number of properties, if it's a long let, i.e. 12 months or more, then the individual you've leased to would normally take the responsibility of all the contractuals, because you would normally hand over the contractuals to them. Now, I think what we used to do was not do that. We didn't actually, in terms of things like pay-per-view, broadband, telephony, we actually maintained those contracts ourselves, and we charged those things. And the reason we did it that way was because when someone leaves, you don't have the hassle of then having to put it all back into your own name. Yeah.
Yeah.
But in the main, for longer lets, you put it in the name of the person who's the occupant.
Right. Thanks for that, Raj, and thanks, Jamie, for the question. Any other questions out there? Please do post them now. We've got about 3 minutes to go. We'll probably go over time a little, but yeah, you're okay, are you, to continue?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Yeah, fabulous. So yeah, we've got new developments, and how to keep up with those new developments is what I've got down here. Okay. So any that we've not discussed so far? Right.
So I'm doing this from an AVQuest perspective. Okay. So new developments is actually very strange. So payments processing, there's lots of changes happening in the UK, and I think they're actually going to affect everybody in Europe. There's new ways that 3D Secure. 3D Secure is when you make a payment online, and you normally get what's called an OTP number, or a number sent to your phone that you then enter as part of the transaction to prove it that you own the card or have possession of the card. There's a lot of changes happening to that. March 14th, I think, is the date when when the acquirers are going to start monitoring transactions, certainly in the UK. And if you haven't upgraded your systems, or you aren't doing certain things, by June the 2nd, I think it is, they're going to stop all those transactions from taking place that you might otherwise have. So it's really important that your payment solution provider is keeping you aware of what they're doing technically, to ensure that you don't suddenly find yourself going into the summer and your payments processing your online processing suddenly stops working. Okay, so that's really important. There's lots of new options being made available. There are a lot of providers in Europe in particular. Again, because of what's happening in Sweden, Norway, with DIBS bringing their systems to an end, there are a lot of new providers coming in. Okay, and some of their interfaces are horrible. I hate to say it. I don't normally have headaches over interfacing into systems, but honestly, some of these guys who've created these systems, you do wonder what planet they live on. But the beauty of it is they are mega cheap. So take advantage of the payments platforms to build the interface or to provide those interfaces, because the costs are significantly different. We're seeing significantly lower rates being made available to people in the Nordic countries. And if you're a reasonably large size operator, that's a lot of money you're saving. And also the money is coming through very quickly. So definitely look at the new providers and be willing to talk to them. In terms of other stuff that we're doing, and I'm going off at a tangent now, Richard, but it will give an idea of the sort of developments that come out of payments processing that have got nothing to do with payments processing. I mean, one of the things that we're developing, and it's actually one of our high priority developments, is we're working with some of the doctors here in West London to actually help with cancer patients. Okay, and it's actually payments processing technology that's being used to help monitor cancer issues that people have on skin lesions and so on. And so it is quite strange where some of this stuff goes, but it gives an idea of how secure the systems have to be. The reason that they were willing to sort of look at the technology in the first place is because we demonstrated we were very secure. we demonstrated that we were doing things that actually ensured that information was being managed in such a way that they would have confidence that no one could get access to it. Okay, so and that's something that I think people should remember. In a payments processing, we tend to take it for granted. If you're a PMS provider and you're doing stuff within the PMS, just remember they have to up their game, not just in terms of payments processing and the support they give to you, but also in the way they handle data and what they do. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things happening. How you keep abreast of it, my own view is your payments processing platform should help you. It's hard. It's no one person on their own as an operator can keep abreast of this stuff. One of the other things we're doing as well, when we designed this, the infrastructure at Think, part of the designs included reading gas meters and electric meters using what's called a Nagios interface. So one of the things we're also doing, I think I announced it earlier this year at one of the SABA meetings we had, but we are definitely looking at interfacing the payment solution with gas and electric readings, so that if people abuse an apartment in terms of energy consumption, that the payment system can then just handle an additional payment based on that additional usage. So we're definitely doing that. And at the moment, we're in talks with the university about their property, about actually looking at implementing it there.
Right, interesting, because the security aspect that you mentioned there. I mean, it can be introduced, so into so many areas, I suppose.
Yeah.
Did you want to mention, or please do mention, should I put it like that, your podcast that people?
Yeah. Thank you very much. I mean, you say my podcast. I mean, it's actually you're the co-host.
No, I'm just.
Last year, I came up with an idea for a podcast. It's called Hospitality News and Views. And thank you, Richard, for allowing me to mention it. And the idea was to provide a reflection of what's happening. Obviously, a lot has happened over the last couple of years. And in some respects, when Richard and I are on there, it's a personal view of what's going on in the world in terms of hospitality. There's a new podcast that we'll be hopefully releasing tomorrow with Michael McCartan. I think it's going to be a really interesting one for people who are interested in rates and how to ensure you don't leave money on the table. I think that's probably the best way of describing it. Far too many service department operators and hotels actually leave money on the table when it comes to revenue. Okay, so they could do certain things, they just don't do it, and as a result, they have less revenue. And that's one of the things that Michael and I discuss in that podcast, as well as a whole range of other things to do with analytics and also what's going to be happening in the world based on things that we know are going on at the moment. And by not at the moment, I'm talking about this is going back a few months, but we know that Expedia and Booking.com have made certain commitments to the way they're going to advertise properties online, and we talk about that, and we talk about what some of the implications that may have on the industry. So yeah, Hospitality News and Views. It's available on Amazon, Apple Podcasting, Google, and so on and so on. All the main podcasting platforms appear to have access to it. And I know it's listened to in America. We seem to have more people in America listening to it than in the UK. So please, in the UK, listen to it. And more than happy for any feedback.
Fabulous. Thank you, Raj. And yeah, funny you mentioned Apple. I was standing behind some lad at the checkout at Sainsbury's yesterday. He wanted to pay with Apple, and he kept talking about Apple Pay, and the lady kept saying, "We don't sell Apple cake." So they should change their name. But talking about Apple, it reminds me of another situation, actually, and one where I wonder whether you wanted to mention with the activity that your wife and...
I can, yeah. Thank you very much for that. Actually, before I mention that, can I just mention a couple of other things in terms of future developments that I personally think are important? So I'm not saying that others will agree or disagree, but from a personal perspective, I think it's important. We are working on integrating Apple Pay and Google Pay and Samsung Pay into our payment solution. I personally believe that more and more people are going to do their bookings via their phone or tablet, and they're going to do it either in front of a television when they're at home, or they're going to be doing it while they're commuting. Okay, we have got lots of stats in pre-2020. Pre-2020, we have lots of stats that showed that an awful lot of people booked accommodation during lunch hour in front of at their desk. It's actually quite phenomenal what the numbers were. Okay, but now I think that because of what's happened with the pandemic and so on, people are far more familiar with using their mobiles and tablets to do this. And when you want to do a booking on those in those environments, I personally feel that you don't want to reach for your wallet. You don't want to have to get your credit card out, especially on a commuter train or bus. Okay, so that's what's driving our development strategy in ensuring that we can integrate with those systems and ensure that you can maximize your bookings on those platforms. And your payment providers should be doing this too. That's my view. I'm not saying they are. I know many aren't, because it's quite complicated. And you know, there are a lot of issues around how to do that properly. But that's one of the developments that I see as being a very important one for 2022. In terms of allowing me to talk about my wife, yeah. So as we know, I know what's happening in Ukraine is terrible. Okay, it's really, really bad, and people are trying to get out. And what I wanted to highlight was that sometimes it's amazing how networks are built up. You don't even realize you can do things until you're asked to do something. So just this morning, actually, my wife received a phone call from a friend who told her about 3 students who were actually trapped in Lviv, I think it was. And she doesn't know anyone in Ukraine, but she received a phone call and they are now on their way out.
Mm.
You know, it's really weird. She called somebody in Switzerland. They said, we know someone in Poland. The guy called back, and the guy in Switzerland has actually organized the cars now because he now knows exactly who to go to. So it's quite strange. A phone call to somebody who knew nobody has enabled those 3 students to actually get out. So I think that, you know, sometimes we shouldn't be afraid of taking that call or thinking a bit more about how we can help people. So yeah, thank you for allowing me to say that.
No, that's fantastic.
Obviously, all our prayers and best wishes are with all the people of Ukraine. And
absolutely, you know, it's such a complicated situation out there, as well as a tragic one, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, won't even start going into it further, to be honest. But no, that's been very very enlightening there, Raj. So thank you for that.
Do you want me to talk about how much things cost? I know it sounds a bit weird because mostly people keep these things secret, but I'm quite happy to give an idea of what you should expect to pay for this stuff.
Well, let's do that. Can I just jump in and say that, because then just to kind of summarize on it from a lay perspective, that my understanding of this whole payment processing thing is that, you know, you can help with the smooth running of collecting the deposits, handling cancellations and refunds, and sort of not restricting exactly, but limiting some of the refunds, and especially fraudulent activity and kind of suspicious chargebacks, perhaps. So the whole processing, as well as then adding an extra layer of security into all those transactions, which, you know, apart from making the business run smoother, will have that added value. We're all talking about mental health these days, but it will give you that an extra hour in bed where you get up otherwise and start, you know, checking that you have received the money and that kind of thing. So, you know, if I find the whole prospect proposal very reassuring, you know, to businesses. So yeah, what's the damage?
I mean, it's a fair question. I think sometimes people are afraid to ask, you know, because they just assume it's a big company or it's a small company, or you're having to deal with banks and they always fleece you. So in the UK, well, basically anywhere in the world, okay, anywhere in the world, when you handle a payment, you have to have what's called an acquirer agreement. Okay, that agreement should always be between you, the operator, and the acquirer. Never let a third-party company get in the way of that contract. Okay, it's really important. The reason that you want to have control of that contract is you can negotiate pricing, you can make sure you get the lowest price possible, and also it means that you actually, if you have a dispute, and let's say we help you, we're with you, there comes a point when you have to have a conversation with the acquirer. They're all, whether it's for a chargeback or some other issue. Let's say they decide to, they've misinterpreted some data and they're holding back money. If you don't own that contract, you can't even have that conversation. And we can't then talk to the risk assessors who might have actually, or the underwriters who may have misinterpreted the data. So it's really important that that part of any payments processing you own. And that is the norm. I mean, there are some people who try to go through other people, and that's, I think that's a dangerous thing to do. So that's the first part, and you will get charged by the acquirer directly. Okay, with its 0.5% for a transaction, 1%, whatever it is. There's then another element, and that is what's called the payment processing element. Okay, payment processing normally costs around 10 cents a transaction. Yeah, 10 pence in the UK, 10 euro cents or 11 euro cents in Europe. But there are additional charges on top of that that come into play. Now, in the UK, we carry all those charges. In the UK, with AVQuest, there's, you only get 2 invoices. One is from us and one is from the acquirer. We carry all the usage charges on payments processing, on tokenization, on storing data, because they charge for that as well. We charge for that. Okay, so we that's built into our price. If you're a small operator, that's normally done as a small package where you pay a flat fee. So if I give an example of Integrum that we offer, okay, and this gives you an idea of how cheap it can be. If you've got, let's say, 10 units, I think even up to 15 units, the whole package comes in at around 100, 120 pound a month. Wow. Okay, there are certain things you can't do, but because you're small, you're not going to do them anyway. So all of our flexibility on handling multiple acquirers, that we wouldn't do that, but you wouldn't want to do that. Okay, all the automation to do with taking payments, that's all there. It's just that some of the protections that we offer in terms of having multiple acquirers is not there, but all the protections with taking pre-authorizations, handling 3D Secure, etc., handling the website booking engine payments, all of that's there. So it's not an expensive thing. Okay, if you're bigger, then it's different, because there you're paying for the payments platform, which is giving you options, but you're also paying for that platform to introduce additional automation onto the other systems that you have, so you don't have to manually update the PMS. Okay, so where you've got that sort of element, you could probably end up paying about £150 per building, assuming your building's around 30 units or 40 units. Okay, so that's those are the sort of costs that come into play. And then there are some other things that we do just to help companies. So for instance, some people don't know how to set up their networks properly, or they want their email to be managed in a certain way. Because one of the biggest problems with big companies is that marketing people can suddenly force your email to do with booking confirmations, to do with payment receipts. They can force them to go into people's junk. So one of the things we do with our bigger operators is we monitor, is the email going into people's junk? And if it is, we undo it so it actually goes into their inbox. Yeah, but that's not a cheap thing. I mean, that costs about, I think about 150 pound a month just for that. So
can I ask you a question there, Raj? So yeah, you can automate emails to chase payments?
Yeah.
Right. Interesting. Okay.
So all of that is done, and some of this stuff can be done in accounting systems. Some, the problem with accounting systems are they're too far down the customer journey. PMSs tend to do this stuff, or they try to do it, but they're limited by what they can do. And my own personal view of PMSs is that as things are advancing, how much support are they going to give you? They're not specializing in payments. So how much support are they going to give you? So I would always say, work with the PMS providers to say, look, we need somebody who's specialized in this because we don't want any headaches. It's not just about the cash flow. Sometimes the amount of time it takes to do stuff, if you don't know what you're doing, you could end up, going around the houses and you still haven't got anywhere.
Yeah. So jumping in there again. So you mentioned PMS providers and what have you. You have long and established relationships with a lot of PMS providers and channel, and subsequently then channel managers. So first and foremost, you offer payment processing that plugs in and adds extra security and automation to that process. But if somebody is looking for another PMS, then you do offer a PMS and channel manager in Integram. Is that
That's right? Yeah, and I'm quite honest about this stuff. We look at the company. I mean, there are certain operators this will not be suitable for. They're too big, or their requirements cover a lot of areas that Integram. There are other PMSs out there. Integram primarily, the reason we set it up was because back in 2018-19, we found that people were struggling to find even PMSs that were suitable. Okay, so because we wanted automation, and automation isn't just about the payment. It's about how to handle a guest survey. It's about what do you do with the data of a guest survey? How do you feed that into the fraud process? How do you feed it into your marketing process? And a whole range of other things. Okay, so we joined up with a company in Australia. We came to an agreement of bringing a number of technologies together and to offer it as a low-cost solution for people who, I suppose from a personal perspective, I would say that if an individual building has more than 30 units, I could probably point you in a different direction. But up to 30 units, and you can have 100 properties, but up to 30 units, I would say Integram is really good. The reason I put it at 30 is because you might want to offer a lot of other things that hotels offer. You might suddenly want it to be linking into a restaurant. Yeah, but if it's just a simple building with accommodation and nothing else, then that's not an issue. But most people start offering other things. The way you do your cleaning, the way you might start providing facilities. You might have a sauna. There's lots of other things. I mean, one of the things that we're doing with Integram at the moment is we have this module called experiences, and the idea is to be able to, when somebody comes into a service department, to be able to offer them a tour at the local museum or local tours, and the whole thing is then managed. The payments are managed by us. Okay, so we're doing that at the moment as well. Right.
Reputation management. Do you get involved?
Yeah, the analytics has the analytics can take in the guest reviews. I have a particular view of guest reviews, and this is I talked about it with Michael on the podcast. So my view of guest reviews is very simple. It's a very important. I accept it's important. I accept that guest reviews are important, but my personal view of guest reviews are, you should be on top of it, even if as an operator, you should be on top of your guest reviews, even if you haven't got a system. You should know if people are unhappy. Ideally, you should know they're unhappy before they've even left your apartment. Yeah, I mean, so my view of the guest reviews is, and this is what we do with the analytics. We just show you the last 100 reviews, because who needs to go back 3-4 years? We do some of the analytics to say, from the reviews, can we gauge what the perception is that they have of your property and of your service? We do that, but you'd be amazed at how many times it's not correct. Not because we're not good; it's just the way people write things.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Raj, but the analytics then, and I know that we're kind of going off the topic tiny bit, but the analytics that you offer then, so that you can hook into the review management and also then that has an effect on price, on kind of anticipating price.
We haven't done what we're not doing is at the moment determining what your price should be.
Right.
But we do monitor competitor analytics. We do competitor rates. We do monitor that. We also gauge what their availability is like at any particular day, so we know when they're playing the system. Yeah.
And do you not, and you
playing the system and how they might affect your cash flow as a result?
And the integration or the relationship between competitor rates and reputation management, where sort of the rat infestation down the road leads to rates going down, but you don't do it.
We would spot the fact that rates are going down. We would spot the fact that rates are going down.
Yeah.
We don't look at the. We don't. Again, this is more of a GDPR thing, but we don't show you what the reviews are of your competitors. You can do that by going onto their websites, but we just show you what you're getting. But we certainly show you if their rates are dropping, and if they're dropping them on one OTA but not the other, because that can happen. People like Agoda actually flex their rates differently to Booking.com, etc. So you can see what's going on there. But also the other part of it is revenue management. I mean, again, we talk about cash flow management. What is cash flow management? Ultimately, what it is you want to know how much money is coming into your account, and is it are your expectations working correctly? So, for instance, you don't want your cash flow reports to show, wow, we've got loads of money coming in next week, but not take into account the fact that cancellations have suddenly come in. So we also do a bit of revenue management as well. And that's based around some standard industry reports that were developed by Opera. And most revenue managers know those reports. And we based our analytics around what they produce. And the whole idea is to generate the report very quickly, because it takes hours to do it manually. And then they can just feed it into their spreadsheets.
Right. Yeah. Perfect. Well, thank you for all of that. I don't know if I'm getting a bit of a lag here. Am I interrupting you, Raj? Because
I am. Richard, every time we talk, we always go over. I'm quite happy. I mean, I don't have anything to do now, because now we're past sort of. I don't have anything to do, but I'm free on time, because I mean, it's a topic I love. Obviously, it's a topic that I can talk about. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And if people's want to ask more, we can. If not, we can always come back. If people afterwards, we can always rearrange something again later on down the a month's time or something.
No, absolutely, because it's a funny old world that we're living in right now, and we've struggled through 2 years with COVID and what have you, and the impact on business, and now. With the crisis in Eastern Europe, it's kind of like dovetailed into new challenges for business. And,
exactly, and I can add a couple of things to that you might find interesting. So I'm not going to talk politics. I'm not going to talk about what's happening in Eastern Europe. I think we can all make our fair assumptions about what's going on there. Yeah. But one of the strange things that's happened about the pandemic is that, and we've seen this with quite a few of our customers. Now, I'm not saying this happens across the board, but quite a few of our customers have seen their booking patterns change dramatically since September 2022. So 2021. So in the last 4 or 5 months, they're seeing that the seasons aren't working in the same way of bookings. So we're finding some operators who would normally encourage their staff to go on holiday in January, February, having to say, please don't go on holiday, because they're booked out. And yet those seasons have never been booked out. And one of the things that we've had to do with some of our operators is actually introduce hurdles for the bookings to ensure they don't get cancelled. In the past, they never had these hurdles because they had so few bookings. If you had one cancellation, it made no difference.
That's really interesting.
They're getting booked out. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I'm not talking small properties either. I'm talking about some big properties. So that's one thing. Secondly, I think people, we worry about it, but I don't think we can gauge it yet. But I do think it's a very serious aspect of all that's going to hit all operators, and that is energy costs. And this was going to happen anyway. It's going to be even worse now because of what's happened with Eastern Europe. And I think it's really important that people start thinking now about what systems they're going to use to monitor energy costs and what their terms and conditions should be. You'd be amazed how many people are using contracts they sort of wrote 10 years ago in which energy wasn't even mentioned. The cost of energy was seen as so cheap and so irrelevant. It was just put into the cost of running the business as part of the ADR. You just, but now I think people should start putting some serious thought in saying, look, we can't have a situation where a substantial cost arises because somebody decides to put the heating on full blast and leave all the windows open.
Absolutely. It's one challenge after another, isn't it?
And the payment system will help the best in that, by the way. The best solution is to have an integrated payment system. The reason being, remember I said at Think we had this whole strategy of we win. Whenever there was an argument, we would accept the argument, but we would always win the argument, whether it's about invoice or about payment. Okay. So that approach, when we looked at the energy side and when we looked at even the pay-per-view side and all the other costs that we did, the system was alerting people to costs. Yeah. So so a payment solution can say, look, you're getting near to your threshold. We can send a text message, do it via email, whatever, it can be done. You can even do it by WhatsApp now. So the payment solution should be handling the whole communication, because when it comes to taking that payment, you want to be in a situation where you're not having a big argument over what that cost should be. And if you try to do any of that manually, it's a nightmare. You will always get into an argument with the guest when you try to make that payment. So I would always encourage people to look for automation in that area. They may not be happy. They may be willing to do other things manually, take payments manually based on accommodation or whatever, or do things simplistically. But when it comes to things like the utilities or handling costs around that sort of area, look for some form, get the payment system to automate it for you.
It's interesting, actually, and you've touched upon a project I was intending to introduce domestically, where I generate hydroelectric electricity from hydroelectric from running the tap, but then I have to balance that against the cost of the water bill. So, but it's I think I need to plug into the mains for that one. But no, it's fascinating.
It's a changing environment, Richard. I mean, the reality is that how people are measuring their costs today is not the same as it was in 2019.
Yeah.
I don't believe it should be the same. And I think that this is why getting on top of payment, if you want to be on top of your cash flows, okay, you have to think 6 months ahead, 1 year ahead, 2 years ahead. It's very hard to be, because you've got to have a strategy. There are going to be some times when the cash flow will be stressed, but you need to know how to mitigate for that. If you haven't got a strategy in place, how will you mitigate for it? When we were at Think, we we were constructing property. Honestly, you want to know what stressed cash flow is? It's when you're constructing and operating at the same time. Okay. Mm-hmm. And we used to we provide some mitigation to our cash flows by tweaking rates, by changing some of the parameters around the payments processing, by ensuring that we were always able to switch over to those providers who could provide better rates at acquiring. The whole thing was driven to ensure that we were viable at a time when there was a really massive stress on the cash flows because of the work being done in construction.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. It's food for thought when my old brain has been running away processing all of this.
Yeah.
And but when it does kind of like recover, then I'll think back and I'll watch the recording of this, and
it's a complex environment. I'll finish with one little story. And I know it'll be quick. Okay. So
no, that's fine, Raj. I also would love you to finish basically with you're how people contact you, and your contact information. But yeah, you go ahead.
So to contact me, it's raj@avquest.co.uk. That's the best way. Just send me an email and I'll get back to you. So raj@avquest.co.uk. So this is a complex environment. Okay. And as I mentioned, we're doing some work in Sweden because some of the main platforms are actually being closed down. Those systems and the processes around them, honestly, they give you a headache like you wouldn't believe. Okay. For the first time in ages, I've had to go back to my musical guilty pleasures in order to get away from the problem. Now, when you design systems and you're designing stuff, when it's really complex, and there comes a point when you have to walk away from the problem to then come back to it with a new, fresh view of the problem itself. And so we had this problem. It's a big operator. Obviously they can't take a risk of money not going into their bank accounts because the platform is going to be basically closed down, and they wanted to take advantage of the cheaper rates. And as I said, some of these acquirers have interfaces that are a nightmare, and Graham and I had to come up with this solution, and we both looked at it and thought, oh my God, how do we do this? Graham lives in Liverpool, near Liverpool Harbour. He just went for a swim. Okay. I can't do that because all the swimming pools around here are closed. Okay. So, and I can't go for a walk because if I go for a walk, my wife says, why aren't you working? I can't get the guitar out because if you get the guitar out, you're not working. So in the end, I decided, right, I'm just going to switch off by listening to my musical guilty pleasures. You know, those sort of songs when you're at school where you sit down with your mate and you talk about the sort of music you like, and out of the blue, they'll say something like, you know, I like the Bee Gees, Staying Alive or something. And your immediate response has to be, keep it to yourself. Yeah. So those musical pleasures, so I started digging into a few of them. Oh, right. So I started digging into a few of them. And there's a band in Canada called Crash Test Dummies. I don't know if you heard of them. Okay. And they've got a song about living at the time of a caveman, at the time of cavemen. And I started listening to stuff like that I haven't listened to in ages. And it enabled me to just get away from the problem. And I came back to it, fresh mind. And within 2 weeks, we had the solution in place. And they've actually converted to it. This is complex stuff. It's urgent stuff. It's, you know, if you can't turn things around quickly, the only people that suffer are the operators. So it's really important that when you have a partner on your payment side, when you talk to people who are offering payment solutions, that they understand that they have to respond quickly. They have to work to a time frame that you might have to work, that might be imposed on you by your business conditions or by legal conditions. And there's no excuse for not delivering. Yeah. It doesn't matter how complex it is. You've got to find you've got to find a solution. But yeah, sometimes, man, does it do your head in?
No. What was that? Crash Test Dummies.
Crash Test Dummies, yeah.
I'm gonna look that up later.
You're from Manitoba in Canada, so all our Canadian friends. Yeah, I do know one Canadian band alongside Rush and Brian Adams and all the other people.
Yeah, no, look that up. Something dear old.
I'll send you what the track is. It's got a really nice opening.
Okay.
Yeah, in the time of cavemen, I think it's called something like that.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, something that, dear audience, that I ask you to also please look up is Raj on LinkedIn. You won't find him, I don't think, unless you put in there Raj Pal. Raj Pal. Yeah, so please link on LinkedIn. The email address is there. Please contact Raj with any questions regarding technology. You can see that he's very open, honest, and helpful individual with huge amounts of experience. So please do contact Raj with any of your questions. I thank you, Raj. Well, thank you, audience. First of all, those that joined us live and on the recordings for tuning in. And Raj, as always, thank you for your valuable time.
Richard. As always, a pleasure talking to you. Thanks. Thank you to the audience for the questions. It's great. Thanks a lot.
Okay. All right. Take care, and we'll do the outro now.
Great. Thanks. Bye.